Hello and welcome to FCI Live 2026. We are so glad you are here. And this is Foundations for Effective Store Openings. And I'll tell you a little more about that in just a second. But first, I'm going to real quick thank our champion sponsors to FCI Live, Frontier Co-op, Cabot Creamery Co-op, and National Co-op Grocers for making this series possible. They have made it possible for us to not only create the series, but to make it free to everyone across the US. Thanks so much. All right, so this is the session we're here for today, and Foundations for Effective Store Opening with the INFRA team. INFRA standing for Independent Natural Food Retailer Association. They are a cooperative of natural food co-ops. They're going to tell you more about that in a minute. But why I'm really excited they're here today is that folks ask this question. Most of you on this call are people who are organizing food co-ops. You're on the board of a food co-op. You never intended to be a grocer, that was for sure, right? That was never the plan. But then you realize that a food co-op could be something that could really transform your community. But one thing you don't know is really the ins and outs of the retail experience of being a grocery store. Now, as a board member, you don't need to know all of it. But one thing that always comes up in stage four organizing, that's when you have built all your resources and you have signed your lease and your purchase agreement and you have put shovels in the ground, you're starting to build that store, is, oh my God, what should be happening during the store opening process? What should we be watching for? And we hear this actually from opening GMs as well. Being a GM of a startup food co-op is a very different experience than being the GM of an established food co-op. And you may have never opened a store before. So we're really excited that INFRA was willing to come. And of course, they only have 1 hour, and this is a very complicated process, but to give us an overview of what to expect. So I'm going to turn it over to them. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. There are three of us here today from Infra. My name, oh goodness, come on, here we go. Click, click, there. See, there we go. Second slide. Got this. All right. There are three of us here today from Infra. My name is Angela Bozo. I am the Director of Member Programs.
I'm Andy Huth. I'm the growth manager here at Infra.
And I'm Sara Fulton-Koerbling, the retail marketing strategist.
And all three of us have varied experience opening stores. And so we decided to put together a presentation that just highlighted four key areas of foundations for effective store openings. First is first impressions. Second, promotional and pricing strategies. A little bit on grand opening events. And then I'm going to wrap this up today with understanding the J curve. We will definitely keep time for Q&A, although we understand that you could put things in the chat the whole time. And so without further ado, let's get this started.
So I just introduced myself, but I'm going to do it again. My name is Sara, and I work with members at Infra on all things marketing. And when you are getting ready to open a store, first impressions really matter. And for most of your potential co-op owners and potential shoppers, that first impression actually happens way before you open the doors. So you want to be thinking about marketing to increase awareness. You can do that through traditional advertising, billboards, newspaper ads, radio ads, and also think about how you're expanding your audience through partnerships and digital marketing. When you're doing this marketing before you open the store, you're basically building expectations with your shoppers. You're using this as a moment to communicate your value proposition and what sets your store apart from all the different options. So that differentiation is really key. And also, you're trying to drum up excitement. You want to get people committed to your store and ready to show up on that first day and beyond. So you're generating that excitement and you're giving people a reason to decide to show up on that first day. And all of this needs to start, long before you are ready to open the doors. And then once you do actually open, that's such an exciting, tremendous, busy, insane day, which is awesome. But you want that initial experience. Again, we're talking about first impressions. The store needs to be clean and organized. And while, you might have a rookie team of folks who are just, working their first jobs in grocery, they may not know the answer to where's the cereal because it just got decided yesterday, but that friendliness is super key, and having those expectations for staff and that store experience is really important. And again, all of that marketing that you did to prepare your potential shoppers, set some expectations. So you really need to deliver on that promise. So if you talked so much about what sets you apart and what your mission is, make sure that that exists throughout the store.
Mhm.
Make sure that your staff knows, what your reason for being, and that those same things exist in the store. If you talked all about your hundreds of local suppliers, do you have that local product on the shelf? Do you have signage and information about it being a local product? And how are you really kind of sealing the deal on everything you promised? And then getting people in those early days is, almost the easy work, because we're all nosy, we're all curious, and you've done all this, excitement generation for your big grand opening. But what are you doing to make sure that they keep coming back? So, things that you can do to encourage repeat visits, and I'll touch more on this later, but having a fun calendar of events, having a literal comeback coupon, having different events or promotions or community members tabling, and having reasons for people to come back on day 5, day 12, and in through, the rest of the life of your store, so that you have committed repeat shoppers. Marketing is super powerful. And I also like to say that everyone in your store is a marketer. So it's not just, your GM or a marketing manager who is going to set these first impressions. It's also the person stocking the shelves, the person checking them out, what your, parking lot looks like. So making sure that you've had your head down, you've been working so hard to get to opening day, but you also need to look around with fresh eyes and see, is what we want our shoppers to experience the reality? So that is really, really important for your initial days and your initial. Go ahead.
I would just add that you only get one chance to make a first impression by definition, right? So you don't want to blow that one chance. And there's also kind of a truism in retail, which is, if somebody has a good experience, they'll tell a friend, which is what you want. If somebody has a bad experience, they'll tell 10 friends. So what you really don't want to do is open when you're not ready. You've got to be ready. That could mean a lot of different things, but remember, you have one chance to make a first impression.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. And again, as food co-ops, I think we have a lot of built-in purpose, and it's really important to connect that purpose to your customers. You should really think about how you're communicating your store values. Like I said, is it hundreds of local, producers? Do you have a cool map? Do you have those products labeled at the shelf? What are you doing to really kind of put your money where your mouth is and make sure that the values you say you have live and breathe throughout the store? That builds that customer trust and loyalty. And most shoppers, especially folks 45 and under, want to spend their money with businesses who have values that align with their own. And they won't know that unless you're shouting about it. It's also really important to have that genuine customer engagement. So whether that is simply gold star customer service, getting to know folks' names, or being really, really involved in the community and having really strong partnerships. All of that is a way to connect back to your store's mission and to get folks in your community and your shoppers involved. And then again, your customer experience is so vital, and connecting your purpose and your mission and values to your shopper every time they walk in the doors is going to help with brand awareness, customer loyalty, and retention.
This was where we made the joke that if you are sick of hearing yourself say something over and over again, or you feel like you are reading the same verbiage over and over again, then you have maybe scratched the surface of communicating that to the customer. At the point that you have are opening the store, there is that truism that you may not be able to see the forest for the trees. So something that will feel really obvious to you, mission, vision, why we opened a store in this community, is very unlikely to be obvious to the customers in your store. And I mean, it goes without saying, we all need reasons to come back. We all need key differentiators. Whatever you feel like you are sharing in terms of brand tenant, say it 100 more times.
Yes. And one thing that I think is really powerful is developing that community with your shoppers, but also with other businesses, with nonprofit organizations, with the schools in your community, even with just like weird, loud, squeaky wheel shoppers. Co-op shoppers are magical and wonderful and amazing and weird. And you can tap into them as ambassadors, as class teachers, as, take your community with you. So identifying those partners is something that can happen really early in your, grand opening plans. It's really important to make sure that there is that values alignment. So I often see really easy, clear through lines with arts, with education, with sustainability and food access. So that right there is probably 100 different things in your community that you can partner with. And by doing that, you're not only building really great relationships and that network of community that you need, as a local business, but you're also expanding your reach to the audience of all of those different partners. So you're getting that exposure, you're getting that repeat exposure. So you might not be sick of saying it yet, but they're also hearing about it from all your other partners. And you can talk about each other in your marketing, in your newsletters, and really kind of build that bridge. And I think it's so important to build that excitement and to do this early so that it feels authentic and so that, again, when you're doing things with partners, you're also sharing the load, whether it's investing in time, labor, supplies for whatever, activation might look like when you have other folks that you're working with to bring these marketing, activations to life, you can really get double your impact or triple your impact without having to extend that investment quite so far.
I have so many questions about all this, but I'm going to actually behave myself, but say that I'm so glad you're talking about this because we hear from startup GMs, this is from them. The most common thing I hear them say is, marketing's not my thing. Like, and they don't, like, I don't really know a lot about marketing. I don't really know a lot about marketing. And I think this is just
Mhm.
critical for them to understand. So thanks so much.
Yeah, I think it's so true that like everyone is a marketer, even if you don't have a background in marketing, and especially as somebody who is like the face of a new food co-op, like you're doing marketing whether or not you know you are. So, the last thing I'll say on this in this section of our talk today is, um, it's really important to be intentional with your marketing. So there are a ton of different ways that you can get your message out there. And especially with, hundreds of different social media networks and just internet connectivity, I think it is better to be intentional and consistent on just a few of those avenues than trying to be everywhere all at once and be, inconsistent or post a few times and never come back. So across different marketing channels, content will perform differently. So whether you're doing a radio ad or a billboard or a social media post, like what you say and how you say it should be different, but the actual message behind what you're saying should not be different. And so I put omni-channel experience here. And what that means to me is that no matter where somebody sees your message, whether they see it in the store, whether they see it in your email or online, or hear from another business that they follow, you want them to get the same vibe from you, basically, so that, when they walk into that store, they're getting the same experience. So making sure that you're really, really hounding those same points about who you are, why you exist, what is important to you as a business, how you're supporting the community, those types of messages should be your bread and butter for content. And making sure that you're simply tweaking or tailoring how you deliver that message to fit where you are delivering it. So, anything you want to add? Sweet.
Love it. Great work. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. So I'm Andy Huth. As I said before, I'm the growth manager here at Infra. So I mostly handle our supply agreement with KHE. I work with folks onboarding new members to Infra. Um, I've opened a lot of stores in my career, and I've opened stores wrong, if you will. Earlier in my career, I worked for a company called Wild Oats, which was a great company, but they were all about opening stores as quickly as they possibly could. And I couldn't tell you that the litany of mistakes that we made through that process taught me a lot. And then I worked at a store called Jimbo's in San Diego, and I opened 4 stores with Jimbo's. And Jimbo was very, very analytical and didn't do anything until he was ready. And those stores opened perfectly. So I learned a lot from both of those different scenarios and want to share some of that with y'all. Price is so important when you're opening a store. I talked about first impressions. Everything Sarah was saying was absolutely true. One of the things you commonly hear from stores that open and don't succeed is they opened with pricing that was wrong. That's a common kind of refrain for a store that quickly fails because they didn't do their research on their pricing and it was generally way too high or just out of touch with the local neighborhood. So being aware of your prices is really, really important. Making sure that you have your strategy in place when you open, and that you're pricing to that strategy. So having a coherent pricing strategy is critical. Here is price important to shoppers? I think we all kind of anecdotally think that that's true. This number here bears it out. This is some information from dunnhumby, which is a great resource for retail statistics. And here you can see that better prices is almost twice as important to folks than better quality, although quality is right up there. Quality and price are the two most important things. And of course, the key there is a balance. You want the right price for the quality that you're buying, right? And so I'm going to get into strategy here, but if your co-op is going to be a specialty grocer, high-end, very high quality products, then your pricing will likely be higher to match that because a higher quality product will carry a higher price and people are willing to pay that. But if your goal is to be an affordable grocer, then you're going to focus more on price than quality, and you're going to have items that are the best quality for the lowest price, right? Which is a little different than the best quality. Those are two different approaches, but both of them kind of dictate how you're going to price within your store. So as I said, price and quality remain the two most important needs that retailers must meet for their customers. Price tends to be the most important half of that. That's the value core for your shoppers. And if you don't excel at one or both of those, one of those or both of those, so if you're not either a price store or a quality store, if you're just kind of in the middle and you have some good quality stuff and the pricing is just okay and it doesn't really make sense, that's going to be a problem because people won't be able to define what are you trying to sell them, right? So especially in these tough economic times, being aware of your pricing, and if you're going for an affordable kind of market, then pricing in a way that makes sense to that customer. Whereas your quality, high quality items, those can carry higher margins and higher retails. So being aware of your customers, are they looking for value? Are they looking for quality? And then offering the best price on the highest quality that you can. And that can mean different things for your different models. So what determines your price image, right? What kind of a store are you going to be and how should you price it? The first picture you see there with that beautiful, like that's a cheese island or a food service island, that's got kind of a really kind of upscale feel to it. That's marketed and merchandised and the product mix is kind of high quality. That kind of looks like a Whole Foods, or here in the Twin Cities, Kowalski's is kind of a gourmet store, if you will. And those stores tend to have somewhat higher retailers. Their customers expect that. And the look and the feel of the store matches that pricing strategy, right? And when you walk in, the store is not screaming price. The store is screaming quality, right? Because that's what those customers are looking for. Now, there's another picture that's a little hidden there, but that is a more price conscious store. So here you've got more case stacks, dump bins, if you will. And pricing, as you can see from the signs there, that's what's being communicated. Low prices, good quality, but low prices, right? And so the customer expects that when they walk in, and your pricing has to reflect what you are merchandising your store to communicate, right? It's all about psychology because they're going to come in and compare you to other grocers immediately. If you look like a Whole Foods, they'll compare you to a Whole Foods. If you look like an Aldi, they're going to compare you to an Aldi. So you better be sure your pricing gives you a good comparison. If you look like an Aldi with Whole Foods pricing, you're in trouble. And if you're a Whole Foods type model with really cheap stuff and lots of reduced pricing, then it's not really making sense to your customer, right? So it's being conscious about who you're pricing for, what your strategy is, and then executing that strategy before you open and being sure that's ready when you open the doors. So your pricing strategy should be intentional, both proactive and reactive, meaning you open with a strategy and then you react to that. You have to be able to be nimble, change your pricing if you're clearly out of touch, if the feedback you're getting from your first customers is that you're out of line in certain categories, you want to fix those right away based on feedback. So be proactive and be reactive. Pricing strategy should be used to optimize sales and turns, price, image, and margin, right? So leverage your price strategy to increase purchases, to drive the image that you're presenting to your customers, and to capture the profit margin that you need to. Don't forget, of course, you must make enough profit to pay your bills, right? So all of this plays into that. And if you're going to have lower prices, you need to have lower costs. And that gets into who you're going to work with for distributors. We don't talk a lot about that right now, but if you're going for a low price strategy, you need to have a low cost structure. So you're going to want to have the right partners to help you achieve that. Your pricing strategy helps you to be competitive. It's not a differentiation strategy. It's not so much I'm different from this other store, more like I can compete with everybody in my area, right? So you're not trying to be the race to the bottom. I'm the cheapest store. I'm cheaper than the dollar store. You want to make sure that you're competitive with everybody and then offer your own individual attractions. And you're not simply passing on cost changes. You have to put signs on them. You have to build displays. You have to let people know when you have deals. Otherwise, of course, they won't buy them. So make sure you're communicating what your strategy is. So when you're setting an item's price, are you going to crank it up or dial it back? So are you more interested in the margin aspect of that, right? And there are some items, gourmet olive oils, if you will, that the margin could be somewhat higher. And that's how you do variable margins so that you're capturing higher margins on high quality items that aren't price sensitive, right? So think about truffle oil, think about salamis, think about high-end oils and vinegars, that kind of stuff. Heirloom grains, those can have higher profit margins. Other things like milk, baby food, especially baby food, cleaning products, those kinds of things. You want to make sure that your price image on that is affordable. Baby food's a really good one. When I worked at a store called Jimbo's, which is 5 stores in San Diego, very successful natural/specialty store, we had always priced our baby food like everything else, right? So we used like a 38 margin for grocery, and we priced our baby food and our diapers the same way. And then realized, this is like 15 years ago, realized that Ralph's, the Kroger store up the street, was literally like half the price that we were. And we realized that all conventional stores price baby products at low margins, like 15, 20%, because you want to capture mom, right? You want to make sure that you are competitive with baby products because that'll bring mom into the store. And if mom's in the store, she's buying everything else too, right? But we had missed the boat. We just weren't competitive. And so we lowered our retails quite a bit. We still weren't as low as Ralph's, but we were competitive. We weren't like completely out of the ballpark anymore. So mom could come in and feel comfortable about shopping and she wasn't throwing money away. That really helped us. But it was a total miss for decades at Jimbo's. We just didn't think about that.
Well, and anytime someone has a new baby, that is an
Mm.
opportunity for them to start changing their shopping habits. And I
Ah,
can't believe we've gotten this far into the presentation without talking about the fact that shopping is a habit. This will come back up as we continue to go through this. But whenever you're asking someone to change their habits, it's a very large ask. So new moms is a really great opportunity, and especially if part of your image in general is being the more natural, the more organic. The counterpoint to I'm just going to use Ralph's because you just said it. Then this is a really great opportunity to capture that shopper. So a lower margin or even potentially selling something at a little bit of a loss just to get that new family in the door. Another thing we know about changing shopping habits as well is when someone moves to an area. So if you really do have a big community focus and you are really interested in being like part of the community as a new store, that can also help you attract new shoppers. Maybe you created a relationship with someone that's doing like a welcome wagon thing or welcoming people to town type thing. That would also drive traffic. So thinking about those events that change habits for people. And then I only have one other thing on this slide. One of my favorite grocery terms is reassuringly expensive. There are definitely things on the shelf that will move at higher prices because there is a customer perception about quality, or I think actually sometimes in my old world, it was about local, right? I really want to support this local thing, so I'm willing to spend another dollar. So all of these things to say, like, it is great to have things on the shelf that are absolutely affordable, particularly in this economy, but know that there are areas like that quality proposition or that new customer habit change proposition where you could potentially be a little more strategic.
For sure. And that's a great point, Angela. A little story from my buying days at Jimbo's again. We sold this product called Voss water. Y'all might recognize this. It's a Swedish water in a glass bottle. It looks like a cylinder, super
Good
cool,
bottle, yeah.
super high end, right? And we priced all of our waters at 20% margin, which is a low margin, but we wanted to be competitive on water. So we had great pricing on water. That was kind of like having great pricing on bread. In California, water is important. So um, the Voss reps came in one day and asked me something that had never been asked of me before. They asked me to raise my price.
Yeah.
I was like, "What? Are you crazy? Look how competitive this is." That wasn't the point. They didn't want to be priced the same as Arrowhead and Calistoga because they're a premium water. So we raised their price 10%. We upped the margin. We created a new margin category for specialty waters. Uh, because we realized that folks will pay more for these waters and they want to, because otherwise it just looks like a cheap water.
Yeah.
That was a real learning experience, and that goes right into what you're saying,
Yeah.
which is the whole, what did you say with that?
Reassuringly
Reassuringly
expensive.
expensive. You can make up margin in some places. It's called variable pricing, so that you can have really competitive pricing on bread and milk. And that's really important. Great conversation. So retail pricing strategies. There's three basic retail pricing strategies, sort of a big umbrella. One is an everyday low price strategy, EDLP. I'm sure you've all heard of that. Think of Walmart, right? Walmart is an EDLP store. They don't have sales at Walmart. You don't go in one day, it's $2, the next day it's on sale for $1.25. It's always $1.25 at Walmart. That's an EDLP strategy. High-low is a promotional strategy. So things are normally $2. This week it's $1.50. That's a promotion. Sometimes it's high, occasionally, most of the time it's high, occasionally it's low. That's a promotional program known as high-low. Almost all retailers run some form of high-low program. Some retailers run just high-lows. In fact, most independents tend to have lots of promotions, but don't do EDLPs because EDLPs are a little harder to run. You have to have access to everyday low pricing from your distributors to have an EDLP. So you have to find a way to get good pricing either through a contract, through a broker or a brand rep, or through your distributor so that you always have great low pricing. And then you sacrifice a little bit of profit margin on your side on key items so that you're super competitive every day, right? What we recommend at Infra, what we think is successful for stores is what's known as a hybrid strategy, which basically just means you run promotions, which most folks are probably going to do anyways. We have a promotional program at Infra, of course. But then you also have an EDLP program. And we have one that we offer to our members, but there's other ways to go about it. But that way you have pantry staple items, everyday low prices. Mom knows they can get bread, baby food, mustard, ketchup at a certain price, low every day. But then you have the sales. And so when they come in for their chips, it's going to be a different chip every month, depending on what's on sale that month. But that's exciting. That generates excitement. So EDLPs generate consistent sales. High-low promotions generate excitement and foot traffic. and they work together. So an everyday low price, as I said, is a low price across the store. It may include a sort of price promise, like we will have the lowest price on this every day. That's basically what you're saying. They're not promotional items, right? It's going to be the lowest price you can get every day. We have a bean at 149 on our program, an organic bean. It's always 149. We have some customers, members who ask us, hey, can I get a deal and run an even lower price? And the answer from our supplier is no, we're losing money already. So EDLPs you can't discount because you're already passing along all of the cost you can, right? It incorporates loss leading, which means there might be areas where you're just running super low prices to get people in there, and requires scale and supply chain efficiency or a really good distribution partner. And it can be done for sure as a small store, as a small co-op with the right distribution partner, be it UNFI, be it KE, you can access EDLP pricing. Everybody can. High-low is margin-driven everyday shelf pricing and volume-driven promotional pricing. So what I mean by that is it's normally at a 40 margin on the shelf at a regular price. Every 3 months, it's at a reduced price. You're getting a deal on it, and you're passing a little margin along. To be specific, at Jimbo's, we ran 38 margins on most of our grocery. Promotions, we ran 25s to 30s, just so we could also kick in some money to make it a really exciting promotion. But it's temporary, right? 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 1 week, it's a temporary promotion. It relies heavily on manufacturer-supported specials, so the discounts come from your manufacturers. Depending on who you're working with, INFRA, NCG, there are different ways you'll get discounts, but you should get discounts on your promotions. You shouldn't be sacrificing all of your margin. It allows you to scale and offer competitive pricing for a limited time. It does require, to Sarah's bailiwick, if you will, a significant investment in marketing. So either creating your own flyer so people know you have sales, using the flyer that's supplied by your partner, such as NCG or for INFRA or UNFI or KE. They all have promotional flyers you can dig into. And also having some kind of an online website in which you can post your deals so people know you have deals. And so it's searchable on the internet and people can find your store with the best pricing. But if you just put things on sale and don't put a sign on them, nobody knows. You're not going to sell any extra product. So you have to market it in store with signage, and you have to market it externally so your customers know you have deals. And the hybrid pricing strategy, of course, combines a strong high-low orientation with robust promotion offerings, great end caps, and then a strategic use of EDLPs. And you want those EDLPs to be somewhat limited. You know, our program has 115 items. A typical store will have 3,000 plus items on the shelf. Only 100 of those are EDLPs, but that's okay. Those are the key items, right? Those are your mustards, your ketchups, your bread, etc. The other stuff is on a high-low program, and folks can buy in as needed, but they know they can always get their butter, milk, and eggs at a great price. And that's really how you want to run that strategically. And the benefits are an improved price image, increased sales and profitability, more foot traffic. You'll be better positioned to compete, and it creates a lot more opportunities to differentiate yourself from your competitors.
I think that differentiation point is really important here because you have this time before opening to think about exactly what you imagine the shelves are going to show up as and be strategic about like, okay, these lines I'm going to take a small loss on. That's going to be my EDLP program, or I know I'm going to get these manufacturing discounts. And then as you begin to, so once you've like aligned on that, once you start to have sales data, you'll be able to check your assumptions versus the community. If you went into pricing without a pricing strategy, it would be really challenging to use your sales data to come back and make some adjustments. So it is something that, you know, really spending the time before opening to say, this is where I think this is what I think is going to work, why I think it's going to work this way, and then allowing yourself the ability to get, 90 to 120 days worth of data to check some of your assumptions. I am certainly not advocating that you reprice your entire store, but I do think that being really cognizant of subcategory and category movement, like, oh, my community loves ice cream and I only have 4 feet of it. I'm going to change the pricing on this line and maybe add a little bit to this set, easy way to use sales data. Also, it looks like I'm really blowing through this crazy local pint at $12.99. Looks like I don't have as much price sensitivity in this category as I imagined I would. So I have the ability to bring in this other cool regenerative organic grass-fed line. Like it just gives you a way to know your shopper and a way to go back to your pricing so that you can be an effective community grocer.
Love it. Love it. So success with a hybrid strategy requires knowing your competition. That's absolutely critical, whatever you're going to be doing. Understanding what your shopper perceptions are of your store. What are they expecting from you in pricing? Ongoing attention to pricing at category, which is what Angela was talking about, brand and item level, right? So there's some items you may want to price specifically, like this one egg that you know everybody wants to buy and that's competitive because your neighbor has it for a buck more than you do, buck less than you do. That's sometimes you'll do that, but more likely is pricing by subcategory, making sure all your popcorn's affordable, all your potato chips are affordable, whatever that key category is. Manage your margins. You know, if you have a POS system that can do that for you, great. Otherwise, you'll just have to keep an eye on things. Make sure you're not running margins too low in your fastest moving categories. Marking up items that have a particular quality that'll help you sell more and make up more margin. So it all depends on making sure that you're pricing consistently and managing your margins. Make sure you're doing inventories, checking your margin every quarter or so, and then if necessary, adjusting based on the volume that you're selling at certain margins. It can be a little tricky. It depends on the system you have, but you've got to keep an eye on it regularly. Check your margins. Effective marketing, best-in-class customer experience, and complementing your price with your store's difference. So that's pricing. That was a lot of stuff. I'm sure there'll be questions on that. I am going to turn it over to Sara to talk about events. Thank you so much.
Well, we all think of grand opening, or it's commonly thought of grand opening as a single moment in time. And as I said earlier, you really need to think about your grand opening as a way to get your shoppers in the door and keep them coming back. So I'm going to talk a little bit about having not only an exciting opening day, but also an exciting first 6 to 8 weeks so that you have things ready to go, ready to communicate and market, and ready to get your shoppers coming back. So obviously, grand opening, it's grand, it's a spectacle, it is that moment in time that we think of. So you really want to capitalize on all of the buzz. You've been working, hopefully, on marketing your store for the, weeks and months leading up to your opening, but PR, and this is like a really important opportunity for that PR. Developing contacts in the local community in your media. For a lot of places, a new grocery store is a big deal, especially a community-owned food co-op. So, the articles practically write themselves, but you really want to make sure that you are reaching out to the right people and, again, building that sort of network, so that you can get other folks to help talk about you. That also means inviting them to the opening, having them there, and really, really drawing that into a big celebration. So once you've got folks coming to your opening, there's often, giveaways or, the first 200 people get a gift bag, those sort of standard things. But you can also have limited time offerings. Maybe you do something different every hour. Maybe you do something different for the first 3 or 5 days where it's a different highlighted product or a different highlighted community partner. But basically, you want to create a spectacle. I used to work in a previous lifetime with Whole Foods Market. They always do their store openings on a Wednesday. They bake a ton of weird shaped loaves of bread. They write the name of the store on it and they all like rip it open. And it's this weird thing, but it's like this spectacle. So think of what you want those like photos to look like. Think of, are you gonna have a petting zoo in the parking lot with like cute baby animals? Like, what are you gonna do to like get people to come, get people excited, get people to post on their own social media and just like really generate that buzz? Again, you're doing all this work to drive all these people to your store, and you need to follow through with excellent store conditions. Your folks need to be competent and knowledgeable. And like to Andy's point earlier, like be open when you're ready to open. Because the worst thing you can do is have kind of a less than stellar first day because you weren't ready. The shelves didn't have a ton of product on them, and you never really get that opportunity to have them back. But when you've got excellent store conditions, when you've got folks on the floor ready to help and ready and excited to be there, and you've got that important marketing throughout the store about your mission, about your vision, about what shopping at your store does for your community, then you're going to have an amazing opening. And you should have things happening in your store and in your community related to your store for the next several weeks. I say 6 to 8 weeks because that's like a nice moment. We talked about reassessing your pricing and things in 90 to 120 days. So you really want to have your marketing plan ready for the first 60 days at least. And I've just thrown a ton of different ideas on this slide that sort of go from low lift to high lift, and you can sprinkle these things throughout. Do you have a short sale? Is it a weekend sale? Is it a 1 day fire sale? Like, what is that? That just involves some signage, maybe a little bit of social media, and changing the price in your system. That's super easy. A sampling event. That can either be inviting all of your brands and your vendor partners into the store or simply having a few folks around the store. Hey, do you want to try this? This is my favorite flavor of this chip. Like doing things either really informally or
Mhm.
setting up tables all across the store with like an active sampling event. You can do educational classes and lectures. If you are positioning yourself as a leader in the community with really knowledgeable staff and, amazing history and experience, like have that front and center and teach things to your shoppers. It's really easy to do sort of like take and make classes. If you've got like bulk wellness, you can do body scrubs, bath salts, and tons of different things with the cost of a few bulk items and some jars. And people come in, they make something, and they get their very own like customized, essential oil blend. Those can be super easy. If you've got any space in your store, you can do some sort of yoga or movement class. Again, making sure that you're kind of working with the health and wellness, aura that is around most of our co-ops. If you've got the space and you've got a little bit of, induction burners, you can lead a really great cooking class. And if you don't have that, I've seen folks do make your own sourdough starter or make your own sauerkraut, and you just need like clean tables and cutting boards, and like that's all you need. So you can really scale them up or down. And then going back to being a real pillar in your community, you can bring philanthropy into events where perhaps you are partnering with an organization, whether it is a local nonprofit or any sort of organization that does fundraising, and you do a community giving day where you give a certain portion of your sales that day to this organization, but you get them to market it for you to everyone that they know, everyone that cares about that cause, have them, tabling and educating your shoppers about what they do. And that will get folks to come in on that particular day, probably spend more money than they would have ordinarily. And then you also get the sort of post-event content and community engagement where you share how amazing the day was, how much money you were able to raise for this organization, and like what they're going to do with that money, which I think can be really powerful. And then, we've got INFRA members that do crazy concerts in their parking lot or even inside of the store. And it's just a fun way to make it an event and make going to the grocery store more than just, your weekly chore. And again, you can do some of these, all of these, and you can really work with the amount of labor and the amount of bandwidth that you have, because also, hopefully, you're busy as heck and you're, restocking the shelves and getting folks in and out of the store. So,
The
there's a
only
lot. Oh, go ahead.
The only thing I would add here is that community giving day, that can be as big or small as you want it to be. And you can always think about an interesting quid pro quo here. Do you want to be known for cool sandwiches? Then your community giving day could be come buy this sandwich and this community gets a particular portion of it. Now they're doing a little bit of cool free marketing for you about your sandwich program. Maybe the sandwich that you choose to do for the community giving day is unique enough that for both organizations, that's going to get you a little extra interesting social media love. So a lot of these things, while in service to the community and definitely driving traffic, there are pieces of this that can also reinforce your brand image or like push particular items in ways that can be really great for both organizations.
I love that. Awesome.
Just want to give you
I
guys a
just
little
add,
time check. We have about 12, 13 minutes.
Oh,
We've got one more slide.
we have got one slide, and I'm going to wrap this up really quickly, friends.
let me just say, vendors will give you all kinds of free stuff for your opening.
That's true. Take the swag. All right. So, in my old world, I opened quite a few stores for New Seasons Market on the West Coast, and I will tell you that the J curve was a part of every single one of our store openings once we realized that it was a thing. And it was a little bit of a thing for us because we guaranteed our employees hours. So, depending on how you choose to rock your operational labor budget, this could have a bigger or smaller effect. I need you to know that at that A point is where your grand opening sales are likely going to be. To Sarah's point, people are curious. They're like interested in your proposition. They're coming into your store just to like check things out. Then you're going to experience potentially a little bit of a sales drop. Don't get depressed. Don't start laying off the people that you've just spent all this time training. Know that there is what we call this J curve where sales are going to take a little bit of a dip as people are figuring out that habitual shopping habit. And then in my experience, they'll do the slow crawl back up. I partly just want to say this, to protect your labor hours and the investment that you've made into people, but also because business is hard and changing people's shopping habits can be really challenging. Do not be depressed by the J curve. Now you're part of the club. No need to be super reactionary. We were talking about some of that price changing stuff. It's good to be intentional and to know who you are, but it's also, for things like shopping and habit and your brand image, if you feel really passionately about some things, give it time. There are definitely things that will be okay as long as you can take a deep breath somewhere on the bottom of that from A to B. We get to B, we're feeling a little better. From C, we're feeling really good about the decisions that we've made. So we will now open that up for any questions or comments. Thank you so much.
You guys have lots of comments and questions, and I'm not, wow, you slipped that J curve thing in there. I have comments on that, but I'm not going to go there. Let's talk to our audience first. We had a couple of really good big questions. How do you suggest a marketing plan and strategy get defined? Who defines it? Who executes it in a small store that is running really lean?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I feel like marketing is often a task or a set of tasks that is shared by many people. Obviously, you likely have a board that is helping to lead that kind of direction setting. And if you are lucky enough to have a marketing manager, that communication between a GM and the board and the GM and the marketing manager is super important pathway. If you are smaller than that and leaner than that, really having sort of clear ideas about what marketing means in your store. Is it the donation budget? Is it the, social media? Is it signage? And just really kind of detailing what that responsibility actually is and who owns that is really important. And then reaching out to your resources to get more specific kind of help brainstorming and creating that strategy.
Great.
Excellent. This one, I think, so this one goes more to ops. How often do you suggest doing inventory after that store opens and evaluating margin and making those adjustments? In between inventory and when sales are struggling, what do you recommend we do to monitor this?
I always thought quarterly inventories made sense. Monthly is a little bit brutal, but I think 1 quarter after you're open, it would be wise to do an inventory and see where your margin is at, and then try to do one every quarter going forward. It can get away from you if you do it less often, and monthly is just a ton of labor. So
I
Agreed.
will say also with perishable departments more frequently might make sense. So like in your produce, monthly might be a more appropriate thing, but you don't need to do like a whole store inventory. That for you.
That is often the advice in food co-ops, yep, is that if you don't know your margin yet, or you know you're having trouble in your margin in deli and or produce, that you can do it as often as monthly to keep an eye on it, but otherwise quarterly.
Agreed. Yep,
Yep.
agreed.
And it's a tough thing to get your hands around. Maybe you guys experience this or not, but we find with startups, it takes such little error in how you're entering invoices and how you're that the margin often makes no sense at first. And sometimes I'm like, let's at least make sure you're looking just at the store wide margin, like where are we landing? Sometimes it is that something you guys experience too, that takes a while for the individual department inventory levels and stuff to get more accurate.
Yeah. Yep,
Okay.
absolutely. It can take like a year for everything to sort of even out across the store.
And this is why you guys will hear us harp on sales, labor percent, and cash before you'll hear us harp on margin. Not because your GM shouldn't be focused on it, but because they may or might not know what's going on with it as tightly, and you can't change it as fast necessarily. Price image is actually more image. I would be interested if you agree, Andy, is more important to keep on top of in those early days. Not again, the GM should work on margin, but as a board, watching what they're doing with that, adjusting the price image work, the
Yeah, for
margin
sure.
information will come.
I couldn't agree more because the price image goes to your competitiveness. So yeah.
Right. And that doesn't even need to be changing prices. That could just be changing where an item physically shows up, which actually could be a little bit easier. Yeah, for sure.
And how you highlight your sales and all that good stuff. So, yeah, great. In general, what products have strong margins in order to offset loss leaders? So, where do we see loss leaders, and where do you talked about this a little before, but where do we see those strong margin products, and where do you see loss leaders being necessary?
Yeah. So strong margins, specialty items tend to be strong margins. So think salamis, vinegars, oils, some pasta sauces, things that are going to be what's considered sort of good, better, best, your best items. Those are going to be your higher end items that customers are going to buy because they're looking for quality. And where you want your loss leaders is in your most common staple items. So when I think of a loss leader, a lot of the stores I've worked at have done produce loss leaders, right? So if you have, limes that are 20 for a buck, that's a loss for me, but that's going to bring people in to do a lot of shopping in the produce department. Milk, eggs, that kind of
Always
stuff.
milk.
Always milk.
Definitely running low margins on that. I don't think you can go under cost legally in a lot of places, but you can certainly run it at cost or slightly above cost to bring people in, especially right when you open. Come in and get your milk and eggs, I'll give it to you for the first couple of weeks just to get you in the door. So
Nice.
that's what I would do. But your balsamic vinegar aged 30 years, that doesn't need to have a 25 margin.
Absolutely.
I also think you can be really dynamic about this. Like for example, in my old world, we tied bakery and meat department together because we wanted a really low margin in meat, but we wanted a high margin in bakery. So instead of looking at them as separate departments, we started looking at them together so that we could price together. And that actually ended up making it so that we were able to be more flexible in both departments, but then also look at two production departments' labor budget together to ensure that we were still offering what people wanted, but like looking at that more as a separate business. So you can get really dynamic the way that you look at both departments and full categories as well. Like I want to take a lower margin on this entire nut butter set, and I know that I'm going to offset that by, pick another center store set. So especially if you have grocery people that are really motivated and want some kind of interesting way to be more involved in the business, that can be a really interesting challenge to give them as kind of an employee growth opportunity as well. Like we know we want to be here with this. What other like categories or subcategories could we look at in the store to kind of think about that just on a slightly bigger level? And honestly, your store level employees are going to have kind of cool ideas around that in my experience.
Excellent. Um, it didn't show up in the chat, but I'm going to ask this because it's something I try to come from interested you guys' take on it is that you guys talked about, you need to stand out, individuate, and some of our co-ops are opening in highly competitive markets. And I find there's a lot of focus like on center store, but not those like things that make it magic and make you want to come in. And I just wondered, uh, I have a thought process around it, but I wonder what your thoughts are around, if you're in a highly competitive market, how do you stand out so people want to come in?
I think it's really easy to focus on like center store grocery for so much of things because that is like what most folks I feel like are familiar with. It's the most sort of stable, it's the easiest to like affect, I think. However, in searching for like what sets you apart and what are those like moments to, delight your shoppers and what is going to really make them see you as a destination totally depends on every single thing about your store, right? Is it your location? I talked to a member a couple of weeks ago and they were like, we are in a really dense grocery area. We've got, the main traditional chains. We've got an Aldi, we've got a Trader Joe's, we've got, Sprouts, and they've got everything everywhere near us. And they're like, honestly, the thing that we think is like the most compelling thing to tell our shoppers, but that we don't really know how to communicate is we have a really nice, easy parking lot. It's easier to get here. You don't have to make three left turns across, a strode. And we really want to talk about how it's so easy to get here, get in, and get out. And I was like, that's actually such an important factor
Mhm.
in people's shopping is how quickly can I go do this chore and am I going to pull my hair out and am I going to get in an accident in the parking lot? Like those are things where, and nobody thinks like my parking lot is like the fun, sexy differentiator that I want my marketing to like focus on.
I built
But
my sales
that's
on
what
it at my store.
shoppers, yeah, that's what shoppers care about. So
Yeah.
Yep.
go ahead.
I would just say when you're planning your store, if you're going to open in an area that has a lot of competition, obviously you're going to need, before you even decide I'm going to open a store here, you would need to know what is my competitive edge here?
Mhm.
Just opening another store in an area with lots of competition, you're not going to have a chance unless you're doing something that somebody else isn't. So your model right from the start has to be something that's going to be competitive. So maybe you're the only natural store in amongst all of these conventional stores, whatever. It's got to be something from the very get-go. That's part of your business plan right from the start.
And everyone's always going to have opportunity in perishable. I mean, you start looking at demographic information. One of the things that you can really be a differentiator and compete on is trying to win that Gen Z shopper. And I mean, they're shopping at convenience stores, you guys. Like, they're going to like corner, like, really like the type of things that like the elder millennial and I am like, what? You're shopping for food where? And so really thinking like, we keep saying in grocery meal solutions because it's a real thing and it's really hard to execute. And so any amount of perishable navigation, any amount of like interesting prepared foods or deli sets or even pulling together perishable and non-perishable items in a way that like conveys to the customer, you eat this as a meal is going to be a differentiator for, I mean, I can only name a couple of retailers that I think even like moderately do it well. It's challenging, but it's definitely an opportunity.
Excellent. And I want to highlight again Andy's comment about like that should be thought about. I think it's not thought about early enough in food co-ops, and I'm not blaming you food co-ops on the phone who are organizing. I don't think it's talked about enough in our industry. It's like here's your market study, and the market study works in your pro forma, yay. But how are you going to get those sales? What's your position in the market? As a grocer, is there, do you have something different to offer? And we do see some co-ops sort of startups running up against is at first it's not clear when you shop them what they really have to offer that's different, and fixing that is when their sales go up. So I just want to highlight that, like, it
Yeah.
is as was being said by Andy, sooner rather than later, thinking
Yeah.
about what that is. And I know we need to wrap up here, so you guys can stay and keep talking to people as much as you're willing, as soon as, and people will absolutely love that. And if you have time, and if you don't, that's okay. But I'm gonna wrap us up on time here, for those on the video. And so real quick, I'm just going to put this up and say thank you. I mean, thank you to the Infra team. We have never actually had this topic covered like this ever before. The four key points that you put together. At first I was like, huh, but they really, the way they fit together and why they're key thoughts to be having as you figure out how to open your grocery store, just really, really helpful. So thank you to the Infra team so much.
Oh, thank you so much. And we cannot stay, but JQ, can you share our contacts if anyone
I
needs
absolutely
anything
can.
or
So I will share the
wonderful.
contact info for
Great.
them, and we're going to get wrapped up. So thank you guys. Thanks to INFRA
Thank
not only
you.
being here to present, which we asked them to do, but also as a sponsor. All of these organizations care very deeply about our movement, and so sponsored this series so it could be free to everyone. So thank you to them. And we have two more sessions left before FCI Live 2026 wraps up. So very different conversation in an hour about AI and how it fits into our cooperative future or doesn't. And there'll be a panel of people discussing and debating that. And then effective board GM relationship at opening. Sam McCormick and Leah Cipanelli are from Assabet Assabet Co-op Market. And they are a very successful startup that's opened in the last few years. And they're going to talk about how they built their board GM relationship to get through that tough opening process and first year. Thank you everyone so much for being here.
Thank you.
And